the TikTok algorithm is evil. What China is doing to itself is clearly evil. One of the challenges in this field is always, it's not just to get a diversity of views, but it's even just to figure out what the right questions. The high level question I want to ask today is, how should we think about AI? Should we think of it as intelligent, conscious, or merely evil? To tackle another question, why do so many people in Silicon Valley believe in the simulation hypothesis that the entire universe, the cosmos, is just a computer simulation? Why do they believe something as crazy as this? I think probably the peak belief in the simulation hypothesis was maybe something like a decade ago, sort of maybe circa 2012 to 2015, and it has probably faded some. People, will still, you still have Gen Z people say that things are a glitch in the simulation, or there's still some sort of passive reference to it, but it's a little bit less intense. The first very dumb answer to the simulation hypothesis question is that it's just sort of a sociological status game between the computer science and the physics people. In the 2000s, 2010s, computer science became the most important field. You could sort of say that you were showing that you were more important than the physics people. You got to determine what ultimate reality was, and it wasn't particles and matter and fields, but it was just bits in a computer, and that this is sort of a physics versus computer science type dynamic, and reflected something about that. The more fundamental answer on cosmology, something had gone very haywire in physics. You had sort of the multiverse. A lot of the Big Bang inflationary cosmology had gradually gone into this infinite multiverse where basically anything goes. Probably on some level, you want to critique the multiverse as a theory of science. It was one where the physicists couldn't think through enough. Questions like where being lost in all these infinities is tricky. If you cannot do induction, are you still doing science? Is it a universe that's too big for science? And that's why I think you should often think of the multiverse as a gateway drug to all these very different things. And once you have the multiverse, you can also have the matrix or a simulation. You can have Boltzmann brains, all kinds of strange possibilities for the nature of the universe. And even if we say the simulation hypothesis is kind of crazy, on some level, is it really crazier than the multiverse, and sort of linked? Now, there's a third answer I'm going to give to why the simulation universe theory gained so much traction. We should look back on the last 17, 20 years of AI, AGI. And if we went back 20 years in time, it was super optimistic. It's going to be cornucopian. 2005 was the year Kurzweil wrote, "The singularity is near." You're going to have accelerating technological progress, runaway technological progress. In some ways, it felt like you didn't have to do much. So it was somewhat passive for the humans. You just had to sit back, eat some popcorn, watch the movie of the future unfold. And then there were certainly all these versions where there was going to be so much growth. We would need basic income as a safety net because there'd be no more labor market. You have sort of incredible discoveries in all these fields. There was certainly some latent question about how you'd have to make sure that AGI was friendly. Of the narrative in the 2000s, early 2010s was in this sort of optimistic, utopian, cornucopian direction of would look like. What's actually happening with AI, not where it's going. So I'm not going to speculate on AGI or even where it's going in the near future. But if you look at what is actually happening with AI, we get something like this guy. This is a TikTok video. One of my colleagues went through constructed a whole series of profiles on TikTok where it's an AI optimization engine that feeds you content that you want to see. That's supposedly what it does. And basically, he came up with all these different profiles for Midwestern housewife, all sorts of people with different kinds of interests. Part of what the algorithm fed you was this fairly sort of deranged content. And this particular person basically explains how he exploits employment law, bounces from job to job, sues all his employers for health and safety violations. It's designed to sort of polarize race relations in the U.S. and make Black people angry because if you have an honest job, you're a sucker. It's designed to make white people angry. And there sort of are versions like this that come up throughout TikTok. This is sort of what I would say front and center what cutting edge AI looks like in the US today in 2022. We don't really know what the full intentionality is. We don't know whether this is just sort of an emergent property, that it's going to sort of take what people want, push it to extremes, derange the discourse. You'll intensify the race contradictions. You'll intensify the economic contradictions, how, the US has the worst healthcare system in the world. You'll have someone else talking about how you should call pedophiles a MAP person, a minor attracted person, because we shouldn't discriminate against those people. So it's all sort of like designed to intensify the wokeness, anti-wokeness, polarize and derange our society in one way or another. You can view it as emergent. You can view it as full-on intentional, where you should think of TikTok as a sort of Chinese communist weapon that is being used to derange our society. The book that I think is interesting is the Wan Huning, who's the number 4 guy in the entire communist government. He's sort of the professor theorist of Xi Jinping thought. And he wrote this book 32 years ago, America versus America. It's basically a roadmap for how to derange our society by sort of heightening these sort of Hegelian contradictions. We submit that if you go with the full intentional version, TikTok is basically a weapon that's designed to derange us through decentralized and heightened contradictions. This particular AI is up against another self-destructive communist Chinese AI, which is the centralized one that's being imposed on China itself, where basically you have perfect face recognition. Everybody knows they're being monitored. They're living in there is sort of an important way in which China has become North Korea. It has gone, those of us who are anti-communist tend to conflate that it was a communist country 10 years ago and is now. There is a way in which the AI technology, the surveillance technology has really, really transformed it. It's not AGI. It is, in many versions, it's barely AI at all. It's just sort of cameras, ways to do big data on this. This is what the Kai-Fu Lee book talks about too, that China will win at AI through these sort of big data algorithms. It's not about the sort of cutting edge futuristic stuff that people in Silicon Valley talk about. It's things about like TikTok or what China has done to themselves. And so, one way to think of the rivalry between the US and China is that it's sort of a question, which society will be destroyed faster by the somewhat dystopian AI that's being imposed on it. And we could have sort of a long debate about that. So with this is sort of the framing of where AI actually is, where it actually, is being implemented in the most powerful, dramatic ways today. Let's go back to our 3 questions about AI. Is it intelligent? It seems to set a low bar for intelligence. It's often just a filler word when we're talking about something quite different. There was a 2016 Obama administration study about the transformative importance of AI entitled, quote, "The National Artificial Intelligence Research and Development Strategic Plan." If you went through this paper and if you replaced every use of the word of AI with software or even just computers, the meaning wouldn't change at all. Maybe the first approximation when you hear AI, you should just think software or computers. AI is probably not intelligent. AGI, that's somewhere in the future. Don't know. The question of whether it's conscious is probably hard to say. My strong suspicion is that it's not. You, of course, have the epistemological problems, the Thomas Nagel, what is it like to be a bat? You have the Searle's Chinese room problem. And so it's hard to say. And for Mr. Lemoyne, who I think is talking later, it was literally hard to say that AI might be conscious. As a contrarian, I'm always a little bit biased to say that things that you're not allowed to say might be true. So I don't want to dismiss the possibility entirely that it's conscious, but it's probably the wrong sort of question on some level for us to be asking. The question whether it's intelligent, whether it's conscious, are just the wrong question. I always go back to what I don't like even about Descartes, where if you think about Cartesian dualism as the origins of the problem of consciousness, the way consciousness worked for Descartes was that it was meant to be, a smart person in the 17th century was supposed to become a priest and use his brains to think about God. And Descartes came up with this very mysterious, different thing called the mind. It was sort of an attention redirection, distraction mechanism. And I always think we should we should remember the 17th century context where consciousness was not something that was mystical or spiritual or dualist in sort of the way we might think of these categories in the 21st century, but it was meant to be anti-theological. Maybe more generally, the problems of consciousness or even of intelligence are somehow the wrong question. So let me go to my third one. Is AI evil? The TikTok algorithm is evil. I think what China is doing to itself is clearly evil. You can talk about evil in all kinds of different versions. Disembodied brain in C.S. Lewis's book, That Hideous Strength, who turns out to be a demon. I don't think that we've had an exorcist at Google to check that out and make that determination. Even that possibility couldn't quite be ruled out here. It's evil in the creepy looking woman on the upper right is this image, Loab, who seems to be sort of a strange attractor that comes up in a number of the art projects that Dolly, the AI art program, has generated. And it's sort of, if you ask what is the opposite of Marlon Brando, you get this somewhat abstract painting. And then if you ask what's the double negative of that, this sort of creepy woman, Loab, emerges. And what's sort of been interesting is that she emerged on a number of things. So sort of this strange attractor. And you can think of it as maybe it is a kind of occult knowledge where we're learning something. Did we really need to know that the double negative of Marlon Brando was a witch-like woman?